Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole. You know, I always get excited when I find who I think is the perfect guest to talk to us, to inspire us to leap into our dreams, because that person has done it himself. And our guest today, we are having someone in honor of the 50th anniversary of hip hop who has been living his dreams for a long time. And this is a moment for many people in hip hop to kind of experience a renewed breath of energy and fresh air and just newness, even though this cultural experience that has so many dimensions has been going on for 50 years. So let me tell you who our guest is. He is a pioneer in the fashion industry. He is called Willie Esco. He's the creative force behind some of the world's most iconic sportswear brands, including, you know this one, Coogee, Jack Clark, Etonic, and of course, his own namesake brand, Willie Esco. In addition to his impressive credentials, Willie is a passionate storyteller, I know because I heard him speak recently, and an advocate for Black and Latinx culture. Please join me right now in welcoming Willie Esco. Hey, Willie.
Hello, how are you?
Doing really well. You know, I had the privilege of coming to an event celebrating you and the many years you've been in the business. I worked at Essence Magazine at the time that you launched Willie Esco many moons ago.
Oh yeah,
and
wow.
you were part of what many are calling the golden age of hip hop, right?
Yeah.
When it was all happening. You know, the energy was swirling, creativity was at an all-time high. What got you involved?
Well, I had no choice but to be involved with the culture in terms of being in a neighborhood that was primarily Black, but I had moved into the neighborhood. And I found that I love music, all kinds of music, but you know, what was on the radio was kind of special. And I think that the emergence of hip hop music, which wasn't really called hip hop in the very beginning.
It didn't have a name then.
It didn't have a name. Bebop music, they called it rapping, but it was just an extension of your street parties, outdoor parties. You used to have close down the streets and get, you know, lunches, and the music that was played there was really it just got into my soul, and the beginning of hip hop was there. So it's a kind of tricky question because fashion was always there, music was there, the sort of culmination of the two laid down the foundation for me to, when hip hop fashion was starting, I had all the tools I needed to really, and the educational part. I had everything I needed for knowledge, entry into the marketplace. And those things sort of were key because without those, a lot of the industry did not know how to address the emerging hip hop customer. But if you knew the music, you just innately knew what to do and how to do it.
And one of the pillars of hip hop, folks say, is breakdancing, and
Correct.
You did that, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Tell us about that. That was fun.
The beginning stages of hip hop in the early '80s, mid '80s. The elements that I sort of gravitated towards was art, which is graffiti, and breakdancing, which is a form of expression of dance, and the two, one was more introverted, which you're basically doing it all on yourself. An extrovert part of it was dancing, because the results were you could probably attract some girls if you're in the center of a dance. So there was two things I was attacking, right? My personal desire to do something for myself, which was art, and then, hey, how am I going to survive in this world? I have to express myself. And the music is another element of hip hop. So in breakdancing, I found that I was pretty good at it, okay. But, you know, movies like Wild Style and breaking, and all these dance scenes in those movies that sort of captured the essence of the Latin b-boy in particular, because I was Latin. And I wish I could grow dreads, and I wish I could, but I was just like a Latin b-boy at its best. And I was like, Crazy Legs was a influence, Dynamic Breakers, New York City Breakers. So all those guys that were dancing, they were not far from where I live, which is Newark. And I was like, man, they're getting global fame through dancing. So let me try that. Maybe I can get more girls doing that, or I can get on TV. So we in Newark, New Jersey, had a crew called Fantastic Force. It was about 5 or 6 of us on any given day, and we pretty much ran all of Newark, Irvington, anywhere we went. And it was a competition back then. It was they would do a breakdancing competition, and you could walk away anywhere from $100 to $1,000. So we would on tour every weekend to go to these events and walk away winning all of them, right?
So you not only did you meet girls, you made some money.
Well, we made some money to buy some uniforms. We bought some Puma uniforms, which was I ended up doing a collaboration with Puma and Coogee, which meant a lot to me in that respect. But it sort of showed me, hey, this thing you're doing with the music is giving you results, right? The art was not giving me the results. Like, the results were coming.
You started out doing graffiti, is that right?
Yeah, I was always doing art with my good friend Ian Scott from 4th grade on. But the graffiti thing, I wasn't exposed to it until the music part of it, and then there's elements of hip hop, and then I started saying, "Oh, I can do that too." So I had 2. If I'm looking at all the elements of hip hop, I'm okay at 2. I tried rapping, didn't work. Just the wordplay was not there for me, and I tried DJing. I just didn't have the equipment. I didn't have the money or the equipment. I know if I had the equipment, I would be good. So I think based on what I had, what I can do was I always had a piece of paper and pencil, and I always, when music came on, I was able to express myself. So those 2 things were important. And being the 6th borough as Newark was often looked at, being able to go to New York City on every weekend and breakdancing in Washington Square Park. That was a scene that was in the 80s, was where everybody went. Chris Rock, a lot of comedians would hold court there. We would also make money at Washington Square Park, and we would make the same amount of money we make in New Jersey. We were doing it in New York, and we were saying, well, we can actually do this and compete. So that was the first hurdle of saying, okay, hip hop. I thought the boundaries of hip hop were very tight. I thought it was the fever. I didn't even know hip hop was in Brooklyn like that. I thought it was only in the Bronx and some Manhattan. I didn't know Queens. I didn't know I know Queens when Run DMC came out, but I didn't know that it sort of infiltrated the boroughs either. And I thought it was unique, but it wasn't. It was infiltrating all the boroughs going out into the globe,
Right.
So
and you were in it as it was developing.
Yeah.
So when you're part of it, you don't realize how it's expanding. I want to talk a bit about the fact that you are Latino, and not everybody knows that from the earliest of days, Black culture and Latin culture were really together in the creation of hip hop. I don't know that this is the knowledge of this is as widespread as the reality. Can you talk about your heritage, your background, and I heard you say that you were often the only brown person in a sea of Black people.
Yeah.
So can you talk about your heritage and your experience?
Yeah. So I think it's a gift and a curse, right? So this is 1978. I moved from one part of town, which is all Latino, North Newark, and I moved towards the west.
And where are your people from?
My family's from, my mother and father were from Puerto Rico, and they came in over to the Bootstrap Initiative in the 50s, where our government was wanting everyone to leave our country so they can, my study is that they wanted the land, they wanted all the resources. So they wanted as many people get off the land and sort of offer them jobs over here, which probably there wasn't that many. And they came over, in the 50s. And that's where my first early, remembrance of being in North Newark is. That's where we moved. We had a nice building. We had a nice block. Everybody knew each other. And it was a lot of Latinos. So I'm assuming that's where a lot of them went. They also went to the Bronx. So there was waves. And it's all, that relative that moved into that neighborhood. And our neighborhood was primarily German originally. And they started taking over the neighborhood. So I felt extremely comfortable. But by I'm born in 67. By 78, I am moving into a black neighborhood. It's not a building. It's a house. But I felt like I was moving up, but I actually wasn't. It was it was not as nice as our other apartment. And I just remember going to this place. And we lived on real sharp curves, so I would often see accidents. I'm like, why are we here? I felt like I was a million miles away from my old neighborhood, not realizing I'm just maybe a mile or two away. But it was different faces, different dynamics all the way around. My next door neighbor, fortunately, they were Latino, and they sort of got us into the home. And I had to start from there. I had to start figuring out. My next door neighbor on the opposite side were a bunch of crazy cats, like the McDaniels in Newark were wild. So my experience and being affiliated right next to them, seeing that wildness go on, right? And making friends with them. And we're not talking about, I don't necessarily see skin color there, right? I just basically see a friend that I could have fun times with. And I started noticing that this one kid who was in fashion, he was in fashion. He would be locked up from time to time. And I'd be like, wow, this what? Like at that age, you're in juvenile hall. So I noticed that the family was a lot of them and they were wild. And so that was my first experience. So the music comes through that avenue. And then there was a corner store, two houses over, that was a pool hall. I remember hearing Sugar Hill Gang there and Chic. Remember hearing Chic and like I love Chic, and then I would hear it remixed into the song, and I was like, "What is that?" Like that's they didn't have a name for it, but I knew when it came on, I was like, "This is the other version of Chic or whatever." Mm-hmm. But it was just I remember walking by that pool hall and slowing down. It's 2 houses away, and I'm like, "Yeah, this is all right. This is cool." If I wish I could. Almost before Walkmans, I wish I could had a radio that I could walk around with without getting robbed, right? But I was just like hearing the music starting to permeate as I'm in the new neighborhood. And I'm saying to myself, is this music just in this neighborhood? I didn't hear it over there. So it was fascinating.
So here's a question, Willie. I'm very curious about culturally.
Yeah.
Well, so you just mentioned what got so many Puerto Ricans to come to New York in particular. Today it's different, but when you were growing up, the Latin community was Puerto Rican. I mean, that was strong. Yeah. Puerto Ricans were the Latin community in New York City, very strong. How, when you moved into this neighborhood that was more African American, how were you treated? Were you treated like brothers? Were you treated as different? Because historically, folks fight each other for no good reason. But I'm just curious, what happened for you?
My experience in sort of integrating into the new neighborhood was, fortunately, I did not see it as a black-white. So my good friend was black. So in school, I had black friends. I don't know why. It's just maybe the culture. I didn't see color, and as most kids don't. Kids don't see color. They just see that we're talking about the same thing. So you're my friend, and so I didn't see color. Started noticing color or color dynamics where my friends would, in the Catholic school I was at, would be treated differently because they were Muslim. And I would always wonder, like, you're Muslim or you're not. We're in the Catholic school. I'm blown away by you're in the Catholic school, you're Muslim, or you're not partaking in the religious activities. And I felt bad. I felt bad. Like, why is my friend not being treated the same way I am? And I just didn't make, you're that's most kids. I know most kids don't see color. They just see, well, why is that not happening? Why? It just don't understand it.
Well, because that culture is what,
Correct.
culture, and then racism, all of that comes in.
Yeah. So my good friend from kindergarten, I'm really good friends with him now. He's the one that got me drawing, and in school, prior to me moving over there, and I like basketball, so they were really good basketball players, and I wanted to learn from them. But it wasn't a color thing; it was more like a friendship. We shared the same things: art, sports. And then when I moved to the black neighborhood, I started. I did not feel any, because of our friendship, I didn't feel any difference. I knew that visually I was being exposed to something differently, but I didn't see it as, only thing I genuinely felt was, if I'm hanging out with my boys, which is not at that 78, it's more like 81, 82. If I'm in a crew and all my friends are black and I'm Latin, I will, and we're running into the dynamics of playing ball or someone, almost let me mess with this one here because he's not part of us. So that would happen, and I would be tested. And I didn't have the same hair texture. It sort of, I wanted to be part of the crew and not have to always fight because I'm Puerto Rican in that crew. So oftentimes it would be that way. And ironically, I started noticing when it happened to me, I looked at my old neighborhood. Any black person in that neighborhood was trying to assimilate to be Latino. So I was like, we're just trying to survive as young kids. We're just trying to have fun, get girls, play sports. And what do I need to do to assimilate in the space that I'm in right then and there? But I would say in the very beginning, it was a neighborhood that was welcoming. We had around the corner were block parties, and most of the time, me being different attracted girls. So I was like, I like the difference, and I like being a big fish in a small pond, but sometimes that attracts people that just want to fight. So that I had to deal with that. That's
so
part of it.
Let's talk about Willie Esco, the artist who becomes a fashion designer. When did that happen? That your interest in art turned into an interest in fashion, and you actually went to school for that?
Yeah. So the turn of events that woke me up, not necessarily woke me up, but it was a couple of things that were happening. There was a shift, and I experienced a shift early, probably one of the early shifts in hip hop period, right? So that first wave of artists, Grandmaster Flash, Sugar Hill Gang, those guys, and even just those were the famous guys in that first generation. I like the underground version of those famous guys in that generation, which were being played on WHBI. Underground, I would have to wake up at 4 a.m. to listen to an hour of hip hop music, because back then hip hop was not on no radio stations. No. There was nothing. It was not in the morning. You would only hear it after 12 in the late 80s, but prior to that, you'd have to find a way to get the song. But in breakdancing and that first wave, the rush of trying to see, how do I make money in this? I love this. I started going to auditions, And I started understanding that the breakdancers in front of me, there's a famous breakdancer named Deuce Martinez. He's a DJ. He won a Swatch Watch competition. So competitions were getting big. Swatch Watch with Keith Haring back then, it was very big. And that showed me, hey, this can take you other places, mainly acting, right? Do I want to sort of parlay this into an acting role or doing something in commercials? Because I started hearing, you get a commercial, you get residuals for life or something like that,
Right.
which was okay. So, but then we had to get a manager. So we were good enough to participate in these big breakdance competitions, be considered as artists to be represented by agents. The contracts were crazy, but I started experiencing life as, hey, maybe I can be an actor, or I'm not good at rapping. This breakdancing thing, how long is this going to last? By 84, 85, the fad started to go away. And I started noticing. But at the pinnacle, we did go to a breakdance competition and almost won. We got jerked in that one, but we almost won. But I experienced, wow, if I would have won in that competition, that included a world tour. And that world tour is with Houdini, it's with Run DMC, Fat Boys. All these guys, I would go to auditions and I would see them at the auditions, and not them, they would be actors in the movie, but they were filming Crush Groove and all this other stuff. So I'm in the mix, but I have to cut class. I have to sneak out of my private school, which was St. Benedict's Prep, right? Across from RTI. But I would have to figure out ways to be on the scene, and it's very tricky. I simply felt like that first to second generation shift, I didn't know how to handle that. Like any young person, like you're going from, Grandmaster Flash, Furious 5, The Message, to Run DMC, MTV, a new generation. And I'm like, I love it, but this generation they're not getting down with breakdancing like that no more. So it was a shift that I was like, wow. And I'm graduating from high school. So I had a window to try and take a leap into it, the actor side of it. And we missed it by, very little, but I felt like the sense of competition, sense of preparation, sense of being able to be competitive in the space where, from the outside looking in, you would be overwhelmed. Anyone would be overwhelmed. But, our group made it on TV and all that sort of stuff. So I felt like accomplishment, but I was like, I missed it by, very little. Now there's a new wave. It's called, the next wave is 85 to, 90. And it's KRS-One, it's Run DMC, it's a shift. LL Cool J. I remember seeing Crush Groove, and they're showing Curtis Blow, and at the end they show LL Cool J, the new generation.
That's true.
And I was like, and I remember being an extra in that. I remember seeing it all. I'm like, I want to do this, but how do I make money? And I just missed it. It was like a timing thing. So by 85, I'm like, wow, what are my options? I didn't make it to the big time, whatever that meant for me at the time. Breakdancing is going the way of the dodo bird at the time. And what is my other element?
Like fashion. Take me forward to
not fashion. Going into art. I said, let me go into art.
Okay.
So I said, let me try and get into FIT. I didn't have my portfolio ready, like any normal young man who's running the streets. Didn't have my portfolio ready, so I got denied. And I said, what do I do next? You could do 2 years at Rutgers down the way in Newark, and until you figure out what you want to do. So those 2 years I took to sort of get more into making money, which I worked at a bank, did my core requirements. And by the second year, I was saying, what do I want to do? Do I want to try this art thing again? I was more into fashion then, less breakdancing, less actually rap. And the house music scene was very hot back in Jersey. So I started getting into fashion, really getting into making money, spending it on clothes. And I was like, I want to make clothes. And then that knowledge. I had to get that knowledge. I was like, there's no difference from us breakdancing in Washington Square Park. How do I get into this business space? Because I think if I can make money off my art, it's not work. To me, I just said, what's the thing I got to do that it's not work? It's art. So I decided to, stop my work at Rutgers, transfer all my credits over to FIT. And it was difficult to get in, but I got in. And when I got in, it was the same feeling of I can do this, because as I did it in Washington Square Park, now I'm in FIT. I was incredibly blown away. I'm like, I'm in a world-renowned space. Yeah, I'm in a world-renowned space, and they accepted me. And I was like, okay, so what's next? I became a very good illustrator. But illustration, I started honing my sixth sense of being able to understand where markets are going. So illustration was also fading away. I'm coming at the tail end as an illustrator, and I remember studying to get into FIT, and to me, the best fashion illustrator was Antonio Lopez, right?
Sure was.
Puerto Rican. So right there, I was like, I can do what he's doing. And then I was mentored by the teacher that taught him. He passed away. And I was like, wow. But I started studying the space. I'm like, this may not last forever, because everybody's going towards photography. And I was like, I need to go into fashion design. And that's when the light bulb went off. I'm like, I'm an illustrator. I can draw something. Let me learn how to draw a collection or draw something. So I just started going into the way FIT set up. It's building A, B, C, and D. A is more like merchandising, nothing artistic. C is pattern making. C, is more designing and sewing stuff. So I would go to the next building, and I'd see that these designers did not know how to draw a lick. They did not know how to draw a lick. They did not know anything about it. They had no clue. Yo, that looks crazy. Your drawings look crazy to me, but I didn't say nothing. I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. You're over here just learning a technical thing? They're like, yeah, I'm learning how to sew. I was like, I can do that. That's just technical. That's like changing a tire. Like, once you teach you how to change a tire, you just know how to change the tire. The artistic part is the drawing and the visualization and what you see in your mind and putting it on paper. So by 88, so 87 to 88, 89, I was at FIT, and I said, I'm going to do fashion design, but I'm also going to be multi-talented. I'll be able to do illustration, graphic design, regular design, and see who hires me for what, because I need to have multi-talents to be able to be hired. It's very tricky, and it was not a place for people like me, who comes from Newark, New Jersey, at FIT, trying to get a gig at this fashion house, which I didn't speak the same language. But so I needed to have more than one thing. What do you need? You want illustration? I can do that. You want graphic design? I can do that. You want me to actually design? I can do that. So I had to become an asset to anyone that looked at my resume, so my collection. And at the same time, I had a retail store in Newark. So I was like, I know retail. I have retail.
You had your own store back then?
Yeah.
What were you selling?
We were selling, back then, I had a partner who would make garments, sell them in a store. I would also learn about wholesale that way. I'd go to New York, buy wholesale, sell it for double, go out and find the brands that I would want in the store. And it was a sort of like a flea market setup, but it was a store booth setup, and it was like a mall type of place. But it was every weekend I was there, and I was learning about, having a store, making money, flipping the money, not making money, all that stuff.
You were certainly industrious. Okay, Willie.
Yeah.
Because we can't talk forever, I want to make sure we get to the meat of your fashion journey. So, of course, like every other designer, you have to work at a few different places before you get to starting your own brand. I don't want you to tell me about those jobs. I want to talk about when you said, I'm making my own line. Now, you already had a store, you're accustomed to wholesale, which is actually really interesting because a lot of designers just have it in their mind. They're going to make clothes and they kind of wing it. You
Yeah.
knew a lot about the business, about buying and selling, and
Correct.
you had been immersed in the culture as it was evolving, presenting
Correct.
itself.
Yeah.
And fashion changed.
Yep.
Fashion became a lot more casual. They call it streetwear now, but it wasn't called anything back then. But it was, you saw how people were dressing on the street. Very casual, but still really cool fabrics and a lot of messages that found their way onto the clothing. What was your intention behind Willie Esco, and how did the line emerge?
Well, after working about less than 10 years, about 7 or 8 years in the marketplace, all that comes with being jerked for freelance, and all of it I loved. Coming out of school, graduating from FIT, that was, if I worked a 9 to 5 somewhere for the rest of my life, I would be extremely happy. I told myself going into that, like, do you want to do this, or you want the fame, or do you really want to do this? So I told myself, I'm like, no, I love fashion. It found me in a way that sort of, out of everything else, cleared my mind. And by, let's say, as the music is evolving, I'm meeting people, and I know that I'm less connected to the rapper per se as I was in the early 80s. I was not on the scene doing casting calls, or I didn't. There's times I would be on the same set with Russell Simmons and stuff like that. So it would be that dynamic, but I'm disconnected after getting into fashion full-fledged. And now I meet my good friend who I went to school with, introduced me to a photographer named Daniel Hastings. And Danny was working with the next or following generation of rappers, which is Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, Nas, and that wave. After Run DMC, after that wave, I sort of left it alone. I didn't like the way hip hop was going, but Danny worked with some great guys. Fat Joe was one of them, and I started styling for them. And what that meant was Danny can hire me as a stylist because I have a degree in fashion. He can take a fee for styling and pay me a smaller fee. But I didn't know that dynamic, but I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I got to meet some rappers or connect. And it was fun. And I was simultaneously working at a place that had a mutual friend who had 7 stores in Chicago. And those 7 stores were called The Lark. And this is a sort of the stomping grounds of Virgil. These are the stomping grounds for Kanye. So those were the locations at the mall. And, this is where the shopping was happening. Kids would go to the mall and shop. And they would visit this guy's store. It's called The Lark. And he came to New York. He says, hey, my friend from Chicago needs help with a clothing line. He has the license for this clothing line. It's called Pele Pele. And he just has the underwear. You think you could do something with that? Now, mind you, I have a 2-year-old. I'm very happy working a 9 to 5. I'm making about $48,000 a year, and at the time, I was happy. Like, I'm quite happy. And I had decided to for some reason, when I meet someone, either I vibe with them or not. I sort of make a personal assessment. Like if I meet someone, this guy I felt really good. Like it felt like I knew him for 100 years, right? So I helped him. He said, "How much?" I said, "Free." I like the exercise. The exercise was fun. I loved it. He came back with $2 million in orders for whatever I did with the
things that you had designed for him.
Yeah. So he was like, out to $2 million, I gotta pay Mark Buchanan $200,000. Forget that. You're the talent. You do your own brand. So that happened relatively quickly. And my communication with him was on par because I had reconnected with Danny Hastings. So we were talking the same language. Now, that's a Jewish gentleman from Chicago, very well versed in the culture in certain ways, but I brought a New York perspective. So when I spoke,
he ended up investing
yes,
in you because you had designed something for him for Pele Pele that earned him $2 million.
Correct.
Hello.
Yeah. So from there that started. So you when someone asked you, I was trying to be naive for a second. I was like, what am I going to call it? Some generic name? I was like, nah. I want to be like Carl Kanai or April Walker. They got the balls. Carl Kanai does, and April was killing it. I knew she was a female, and I was like, yo, they got the guts to put their name on this, and they'll in 50 years they'll live in infamy. So let me again remind, the beginning started was the brown face and the black crowd. I'm like, there it is again. I'm like, let me be that person for this era of music and fashion, which is we're in the first wave of it. So I might as well be the person there. I did it before. So the attitude was there. And actually going through the exercise of him saying, you have your own color line, do it. Unreal for about a week, but then you put your head down and you start designing and you start taking advantage of the opportunity put in front of you.
And what did the line look like? How would you define Willie Esco fashion?
Willie Esco in the very beginning was cleverly crafted around the ebonics of the day. Any moniker or ebonic that was being used in the marketplace. And strategically, I dug into the word Escobar and what it meant to that era of rap and their listeners, which they glorified Pablo Escobar. So the subliminal.
For anybody who doesn't know who that is, tell us who
Pablo Escobar is probably the person who ushered in the cocaine infusion into Miami, and which sort of became if you watch Scarface, that's the template. That's Tony Montana was getting all his cocaine from Pablo Escobar, and that was sort of the dynamic.
And that's your name, but were you related to him?
No. I thought it was marketing as if, hey man, this man from Chicago is investing in me. I gotta make sure I tap into the subliminals or the minds of these kids. Number one, I know it's a cool word. I know I'm gonna tap into that kid's psyche, and I'm gonna turn dollars and I'll make money and then my backer will say, how'd you know to do this? So if you know the music and you study it, and I was also thinking, man, this guy Nas, all the rappers were glorifying Pablo Escobar. That's a Latin dude. And I was like, so it's not like we're going to glorify, they're not looking at the skin color. They're looking at what that person represented in the marketplace for us. And it's sort of unlimited power and being able to do what you want to do. So it signified something to us as rap listeners, and the rapper himself gave himself an aura, a moniker that sort of made sense.
And so let's talk about Nas, because people know you.
Yeah.
There are plenty who would say you got on the map because of working with Nas. How did that happen?
So again, I referenced Daniel Hastings because I work with a lot of rappers, and I was when the deal happened, I went straight to Danny. I was like, I need to speak to Nas because I have this idea, and I want him involved. How do we do that? And this is before sponsorships, anything of wanting to do something with someone. So in the very beginning, I knew he was at the top of the totem pole when it came to rappers in New York. You had Biggie as well, and Mobb Deep and some of the other guys, but Nas was the one. And again, I'm in Jersey. I'm listening to a lot of house music. I know good rap music when I hear it, even today.
Sure.
I can tell, but it was more like he's a poet. Nas is a poet. We need to figure out a way to connect. And I'm going to be using the Escobar moniker. I would love for him to be involved. And that's the way it sort of started. And I've tried to reach out a couple of times on my own. But it was only until I sort of got my partnership with Samsung and I'm under the same roof with Damon John of Fubu that I start seeing regular celebrities come through our doors because of Fubu. And Horace and Nas.
Fubu was so big.
Yeah, Fubu was huge at the time.
Right. And huge. So you are then under the umbrella of this. Was it a showroom that had them both?
No, the umbrella was after my original investors sort of went by the wayside. I had to find new investors, and they also understood. Wait a minute, you're the brown face in the black crowd. Well, we got the black crowd already on lock, which is Fubu. The numbers in terms of Latin culture and our growth was one that was going to grow steadily over a long period of time. So my business partners were savvy, the same business partners that own Fubu. So it was Damon, myself, and our business partners, his two brothers. We all got together, and originally it wasn't as nice as, it's competition. So I how I was welcome in my first neighborhood. I was not welcome in this neighborhood of Fubu.
No,
right?
And fashion can be cutthroat, man.
Yeah. No, and listen, I always I try to understand better than be understood. I understood their position. They had to protect their space, and I was more like, I want to learn from you guys. And I don't know you, so I can't share much information with you. But once they got to know me, I'm a likable guy. So I'm like, guys, I'm not here. I'm here to help. And on top of it, damn, you should take a piece of Esco because it's going to be big. And that's the way I sort of had to constantly make sure they don't feel like I'm a threat to their infrastructure. But again, our partners and us created an atmosphere where if you want, we got the Latin space covered and we got the black space covered. So it was tough in the beginning, but over time, it came down to me relaunching Fubu a few years ago for the guys,
Exactly. But so during the period when you were building Willie Esco, how large did the brand grow to? So meaning when it was at its peak, how much money did you make annually?
We got up to about 50 million annually. Yeah. So once you start licensing and stuff, you start doing things that sort of generate that kind of income, you start making peripheral money. So right. The funny thing was our first trade show, we came in as very similar dynamic. You hear this in music happen a lot. Someone is a big star, but they need a break. So you go to a label, and the person who's at the top of that label may introduce you as the artist. I forgot. I think Alicia Keys did this with someone. Alicia Keys was she was coming in as a feature or on tour. By the end of the tour, it flip-flops. She was, and they were, I forgot the artist that was underneath them, but that's what happened. So Fubu was on fire, and we would go to trade shows, and they would say, you can't buy any Fubu until you buy Esco. So they force-fed people. And once they saw that it checked and it sold, and we started gaining a lot of momentum. And we were doing our unique things in our space. We were Latin, but we were representing the culture in ways that were not done before. We had affiliations with Lyricist Lounge. We would go to Vegas and do big parties. I brought a bodega to the trade shows. I was representing the culture from a Latin perspective as what I witnessed growing up. So after a while, they started saying the Esco parties in Vegas were big. We want to go to that party. I need the Esco product. And then they started saying, you're not getting any Esco until you buy Fubu. It started happening from 97, 98. By 99, the flip-flop happened, right? And we were growing substantially, in big ways, And
so really, I want to know what happened because that your brand Walkerwear, Fubu,
Yeah,
Rockaware. Oh, there were a lot of brands
correct,
owned by individuals or, with funding, of course, but founded by people of color. And that grew really big.
correct.
And then there was a point when, the giant mainstream companies started making hip hop fashion and the business changed. The
Correct.
entrepreneurial, joie de vivre changed and it was like a takeover by the corporates. What happened to you at that time?
At the time, I was struggling in constantly learning business, right? Struggling with I'm in recovery. So when I got into the space, I was already 2 years clean and I was constantly trying to improve self and remove ego constantly. And I was given a huge opportunity being 2 years removed from doing any drugs. And this is going to make me better or it's going to make me worse. The money's
Right.
only going to do. So I went in very focused. And by the time I would always take a step back at anything I do and see how the market was reacting towards things. And I started understanding how the spokesperson wanted to own their own brands. I understand that thinking. So LL wanted his own brand. Nas wanted his own brand. So these people that were used to carry a message of a brand that we were sharp enough to create and cultivate now wanted to evolve and grow. Great, I get it. And me and now I'm in. I can't go to my party. I wouldn't even go to my parties. My parties were on fire, and I wouldn't go because I don't want to be in the space where I'm uncomfortable. So, and even dealing with Nas sometimes. Hey, buy me 10 bottles of Cristal. It made me uncomfortable. The lifestyle made me uncomfortable, and I started feeling like, you know what? It's not about money. It's about making sure I walk this walk and do not change for anyone or do anything that compromises my recovery. That's number one. So as I started understanding other people's shortcomings, I started understanding our shortcoming as a whole in the business. The business was designed to cultivate brands for 3 to 7, even max 10 years before a shift that always happens in music. Generational shift. Kids don't want to wear what their dad wore.
Right.
So you have that generational shift. You have folks that are just used to making a lot of money and thinking they can just do what the newer brands are doing, but they're not the new brands. So my thinking was, hey guys, we should really start considering buying other brands. We should consider, again, let's remove some ego out of it. My brand was on fire, but I understood I got about a 5-year run. Either I'm going to have a fight with Nas or the market's going to shift. Actually, everything happened all at once after 9/11. But
Right.
nonetheless, I wasn't upset about the change. I knew that the change was coming. And I was more so fascinated with how do we make this adjustment, Dame? Me and Damon are in the same room. We should start buying brands. Acquire the threat. By then Google's on the scene. Their philosophy is acquire all threats. If another Google's on the scene, buy them. So I was telling my business partners and Dame, was like, guys, we can't fight the wave that's coming. Rockaware was.
Wait, so who did you end up buying? Because
We bought
Yeah.
So this is where I had to sort of stop yelling into a wall saying, let me just figure out a way to buy something. So I acquired the rights with Tupac Shakur, global rights, right? And at the same time, Dame Dash came to me, hey, help me with Rockaware. Rockaware is starting to get hot. So I'm telling my guys, let's do Rockaware. Let's do Tupac for Platinum Fubu. I offered a lot of things on the table. I'm like, we must acquire while we have the market share, and our market share is dwindling every day. Let's acquire some brands. They're all coming to us anyway for money, because the ultimate thing we had was Samsung as a financial backer. No one can beat us in terms of financing new brands, old brands, orders, anything. So we had people coming to us. what was getting in our way was ego. Like, nah, no way a rapper will sell more than Fubu. I'm like, you guys are, no, that's not how this works. You must make a way for the next wave of guys. And I mean, I would have the conversation with Dame today. Dame knows I was like, hey, we can't stay on top of this forever.
Right.
Go away. And your brand will come back in 10, 15 years. Exactly what I told happened.
Exactly what happened.
Yeah, so I was like, it's just the way it is, man. And thank God he landed Shark Tank. Me personally, I went into Machiavelli and I started experimenting with let me learn about licensing. Let me learn about doing other deals. It's not always about, and that gave me time to spend time with my son. The Willie Esco brand, I sold my stake in it at the time. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I was focused on that. And then they said, hey, Will, we listened to you. We're buying Coogee out of bankruptcy. So I quietly had my own deal on the side somewhere else. I actually had an office in Meatpacking District before it was what it is. So we had Machiavelli out of that space. I was working with Afeni. We made more money than Esco overnight. And then you had Coogee, which they said, hey, Will, we want you to, we understand the space, handle this with us. So I revived the brand.
That was a huge brand from, before your generation, but then you bring it back. Yeah. And others were wearing those sweaters, like crazy. So we don't have much time left, but I want to ask you two things. First of all, you mentioned being in recovery, and I appreciate you being so open about it. During the 80s, there were so many drugs everywhere. Many, many, many people who were on the scene, creative forces, lost everything because drugs took them out. And, I'm curious, how were you able to pull yourself out of that when so many people succumb to it?
I have a fascination. I always had a fascination to learn a process of anything. So for some reason, I was like, let me see what happens when I don't pay all my bills, when I just hang out with drug dealers all day, I literally remember sitting in my friend's house who had like 8 brothers. And that sort of was mimicking what I originally experienced with the first family next door to me. So it was like that vibe. And I was just exploring street life at its core, and I was like, let me see what happens. Now when I started slowing down, or started saying, all right, I'm gonna see what I had a job. I was working 9 to 5, and I was happy in fashion, but I was fascinated, almost like fascination with death. You're like, I want to see what happens if I do this, and I did, and it just bankruptcy, repossession of cars, all that stuff happened, and I slowly climbed out of it, but I did not know I was going to be a designer. So I had to, all of that happened because there was something wrong internally with me that was telling me, come down this rabbit hole. At the very bottom, I'll show you who you are. Now you have to climb back out, but at least when you climb out that hole, you're going to know who you are. Right. So that's where I was like, you get close to either doing heroin, you start doing things like you start exploring with that, and you're like, nah, I don't want that. So I went and figured out a way through Narcotics Anonymous, and just started going to meetings. I wanted a better life. And ever since, and it culminated, the worst was when my father passed and I was not fully mentally there. And I didn't recognize he was saying goodbye to me. As a young man, I just wanted to get off the phone. And I said, I'm never gonna let something real like that pass my ears and me not experience that in a very clean and sober way. So I made a commitment to myself. And then 2 years later, I have my son, and I'm like, my son will never, ever, ever see me in that state. That's just not. So after 2 years, I knew I'm done. And then all the positive things happen after that. You get your own clothing line, and you start saying, whoa, if I I did what I did, and maybe my father's watching over me, saying, "This is your reward." Now, life's not going to get easy. It's the same troubles you have if you're doing drugs. It's just drugs don't help you find a way out of it.
But
So,
I'm so glad that you're sharing the story, Willie, because my program is all about dreams and leaping into your dreams.
correct.
And people go through all kinds of things, including drug addiction.
Yep.
And you are proof that you could have had that experience
Yep.
and wrestle that demon down and create an incredible life and career and family. And I appreciate you sharing it. So anybody who is hearing this
Correct. Yeah.
knows, no matter what you are going through, it is possible for you to climb out of that, no matter what it is, right?
No matter what it is, you have an opportunity every day to. I practice it every day, and I know that if given the opportunity to fix your life, you can do it, but you have to make a decision to want to do it. You don't have to do it; you just have to make a decision.
And you make that decision every day.
Every day, I make that decision. Yeah,
like they say, one day at a time, right?
one day at a time. That's me.
And so the last thing I want to ask you is about now.
Yeah,
we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of hip hop. There's so many artists, designers, creators of the culture who have this renewed energy, and many, like yourself, are bringing your lines back so that people can both, like I saw it at your show, buy some vintage pieces, and also you have some pieces that are new on the market. What has this celebration and moment of awareness meant for your business?
Business-wise, I think it's more of learning about patience, understanding, that whatever funk you're in today, tomorrow that can change 180. And my recovery has allowed me to put everything in perspective. So as normal folks, when I'm losing my brand, I'm doing this, they may have there's the coping mechanisms are not there. So for me, hitting rock bottom and coming back up, now I know how to deal with shortcomings. So when the brands all went away, very difficult for my peers, some of them dealing with it. And for me, it was more like, this is not the death of anything. It's an opportunity to grow. So now, fast forward, I just felt like the timing was right. I had worked with Coogee. I'm not an employee, but more like I'm going to say consigliere of the brand, because those are my same partners. And I would take care of the brand. I'd bring them collaborations and develop the brand. Same with Damon, like Fubu. I'm going to revive Fubu for you. And they, I got met with laughter on both of those things. Like, Damon, I said, it's time, Damon, it's time. Remember what I told you 10, 15 years ago?
Yep.
It's time. He laughed. I was like, come on, D. Yeah, it's time. So they're up and running. Great.
Yeah, Coogee, right now.
Yeah, Coogee, I was able to sort of hit a pinnacle with a collaboration with Supreme. Around the same time, I acquired the rights back for my brand. So the timing and the clarity, the business part of it is where I was really like honing in on, not the financial part. It's the maneuvers you make. All right, I'm going to do this peaked collaboration with Supreme. Now is the time between Supreme and Puerto Rican Parade to relaunch your brand, because that's your time to make a statement, acquire the brand back. It ain't about making 50 million again. It's more about ownership. If I own my brand, I can pass this down to my sons. So I wanted to do that footwork. I'm not doing the footwork to make money necessarily, but I'm doing the footwork for self. What I didn't know back then, I know now. And I'm still partners with all my partners that I got into it back then. And I'm not mad at the deal structure I made with them initially, because I understand why they did it. But now it's different time. And
different time, different structure.
And I worked very hard. It ain't like I have stopped working. I've enjoyed every part of the process of growing into the space that I'm in today. I own a couple brands now, and each one is my baby in that space: footwear, streetwear, urban streetwear, and then some luxury goods we're going to get into. So I am having fun learning still. I'm still learning everything. Like, it's different. You have your own website. I learned how to become very good at that. Shipping goods in through customs, learned all that stuff that I was not paying attention to back in the day. So I have to do it now.
So Willie, where can people buy your clothes right now?
I'm only dealing with direct to consumer, which is WillieEscoBrand.com. The footwear is called JaclarUSA.com. It's a vintage footwear brand, and we're launching Walter DeVucci, which is a leather goods company. I'm launching that with Sharon Barber later on in the year. But it's all vintage brands. That's my space. I think I like that, and I like rebuilding things, bringing things back to life.
Well, that is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You are truly an inspiration.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into Dreamleapers. I love talking to Willie Esco. He has an incredible, dynamic story, and he is proof that if you put your mind and your heart to it and decide you're going to do it, it can happen. I hope that you go out and leap into your dreams just as he has done and is continuing to do today. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.